The woods are not dangerous because of what you can see. They are dangerous because of what you cannot. The trees block your sight lines. The sounds carry strangely. And if something, or someone, does not want to be found out there, they will not be found. This happened 2 years ago on a solo day hike I had done versions of dozens of times before. The trail I take goes about 6 miles into a state forest in western Pennsylvania. No loop. You go in and come back out the same way. At the 6-mile point, there is a ridge with a view that I have never gotten tired of looking at. I go out there a few times a year, sit on the ridge for a while, eat whatever I packed, and walk back. Simple. Peaceful. I set out on a Saturday morning in late September. The leaves were just starting to turn. The air was cold enough to feel good when you were moving. Perfect hiking conditions. The first 3 miles were exactly as they always were. Quiet. Nothing but the sound of my own footsteps and the occasional bird. I passed 2 other hikers going the opposite direction in the first mile. And then I had the trail entirely to myself. About 3.5 miles in, I stopped to take a drink from my water bottle. While I was standing there, I happened to look at the trees just off the left side of the trail. There was a mark on one of them. A fresh cut in the bark. Recent enough that the wood underneath was still pale and clean. About chest height. The cut was roughly triangular, like an arrowhead, and it was pointing back in the direction I had come from.
I looked at it for a moment and then kept walking. Trail markers exist in state forests. Sometimes they are cut into trees. I assumed it was official and didn't think about it again. Half a mile later, I stopped again, drank some water, looked around. Another mark on a tree to my left. Same height, same rough triangular shape, pointing back the way I had come. I stood there looking at it for longer this time. These were not official trail markers. I knew what official markers in this forest looked like. They were painted blazes, specific colors, specific shapes. These were hand cut, and they were all pointing in the same direction, back toward the trailhead, back the way I had come from, which meant they had been cut after I passed that point. Somebody behind me was marking my trail as I walked. I turned around slowly and looked back down the trail. Empty. Just trees and the path curving out of sight about 100 feet back. I kept moving. I was trying to be rational about it. Maybe it was another hiker marking their own route. Maybe it had nothing to do with me. I kept telling myself that. But I started paying close attention to the trees on both sides of the trail as I walked. And over the next 1.5 miles, I found 4 more marks. All the same, all at the same height, chest height on a person of average build. All pointing back the way I had come. Someone was behind me, moving when I moved, stopping when I stopped, which was the only explanation for why I could not see them. And they were cutting marks into the trees as they followed me. I did not go to the ridge that day. When I made the decision to turn around, I stood in the middle of the trail for a moment and listened. Nothing. No footsteps, no movement, just the sound of wind in the upper branches. I walked back toward the trailhead as steadily as I could. I did not run. I did not want to signal that I was afraid, though I was. Every time the trail curved, I expected to see someone standing there. I never did. When I got back to the parking lot, there were 4 other cars there besides mine. I did not know which one, if any, belonged to whoever had been behind me. I reported it to the state forest office. A ranger told me that unauthorized trail marking was not uncommon and was usually done by hunters marking territory or hikers creating their own routes. He said it was probably nothing. I went back to that trail 6 months later. Different time of year. I found one of the old marks, weathered now, almost invisible, still pointing back toward the trailhead. still pointing in the direction that I had walked. I have not gone back alone since. If that story gave you chills, go ahead and leave a like on the video. It genuinely helps this channel more than you know.
There were 4 of us on this trip. Me, my brother, and 2 friends we had been hiking with for years. We did 1 or 2 overnight trips together every summer. Nothing extreme, just a few days in the backcountry with good gear and enough food. This particular trip was in a wilderness area in northern Michigan. 3 days in, 2 nights. We had done it before and knew the area reasonably well. The first day was completely normal. We covered about 9 miles and set up camp near a creek just before dark. Ate well, slept well, no issues. On the second day, we pushed further into the backcountry, off the main trail and onto a series of use paths that we had scouted on previous trips. These paths are not marked on any official map. They exist because hikers and hunters have walked them enough times that the ground stays worn. You have to know where to look for them. About 4 miles off the main trail, we came around a bend in one of these use paths and stopped.
There was a campsite directly ahead of us. Not elaborate, just a small fire ring, a low tarp strung between 2 trees, and a single folding camp chair. But the fire was burning. Not smoldering, burning. Active flames, recently fed. And sitting on a flat rock next to the fire ring was a small camping pot. Steam was rising from it. We stood at the edge of the site and looked around. Nobody there. We called out. No response. We waited for maybe 2 minutes, watching the trees on all sides. Nobody came. My brother walked over and looked at the pot. Oatmeal, he said. Still hot. We left immediately. Did not touch anything, did not linger. Whoever had made that camp was close by, maybe getting water from a nearby source, maybe just out of sight in the trees. We did not want to be there when they came back, mostly because we were 4 miles off any marked trail in an area that very few people knew about, and somebody was already there. We looped around the site, gave it a wide berth, and kept moving. We did not talk about it much for the rest of that day. Mentioned it once or twice, but let it go. Strange encounter, sure, but not necessarily threatening. People camp in remote places. It happens. That evening, we made camp about 3 miles further on and settled in for the night. The next morning, we broke camp early and started making our way back toward the main trail. We were retracing roughly the same route we had come in on, with a slight variation to avoid a section of dense brush we had pushed through on day 2. About 2 hours into the return hike, my friend at the front of the group stopped walking. I came up behind him and looked. There was a campsite ahead of us. Same low tarp, same folding camp chair, same fire ring, and again a small fire burning inside it, active and recently fed. Steam rising from the same style pot on the same style flat rock beside it. We stood there looking at it for a long moment. This was not the same location. We had not passed this spot on the way in. We were certain of that. All 4 of us walked it and none of us recognized this section of the path as somewhere we had been. The terrain was different. The trees around the site were different. Same camp, different place. We did not call out this time. We just turned and walked, faster than before. Nobody said much. When we hit the main trail, we all stopped and stood there for a minute without speaking. My brother finally said what we were all thinking, that whoever it was had moved their camp. In the time between when we passed the first location and when we came back through the next day, someone had broken down their site and set it up again somewhere else along our route. Our return route, the path we would take going out. We reported it to a ranger station when we got back to the trailhead. The ranger took notes, but told us that without more information, there was not much they could do. No crime had been committed. Nobody had been harassed or threatened. The 4 of us have talked about it many times since. The thing we keep coming back to, the thing none of us can explain, is how they knew which way we were going.
because the second camp was directly on our path home. If you thought that was unsettling, story 3 is worse. But first, hit the like. I hike alone often, and I am not apologetic about it. I know the arguments against it. I have heard them from my family, my friends, people who mean well. I carry a personal locator beacon. I tell someone my exact route and expected return time. I know basic wilderness first aid. Solo hiking is not inherently reckless if you are prepared, and I am always prepared. Or I thought I was. This happened last spring on a trail I had hiked before, a moderately difficult loop in a state forest in Tennessee. About 11 miles total. Well marked, popular on weekends. I had done it twice before without any issues. I started early, on the trail by 7 in the morning. It was a weekday, so the parking lot was almost empty when I arrived. One other car besides mine. I noted it without thinking much about it and started walking. The first few miles were straightforward. The trail was clearly marked with blue blazes on the trees and wooden directional signs at each junction. I had done this trail before, so I knew the junctions, knew which way to turn, knew roughly what to expect at each stage. About 4 miles in, I reached a junction I remembered. A wooden post with 2 arrows, one pointing left, which was the continuation of the loop I was on, and one pointing right, which was a connector trail that went further into the backcountry. I turned left. At least, I thought I turned left. I followed the arrow and kept walking. The trail felt slightly different than I remembered. The grade was steeper in places, the tree cover was denser. I told myself that trails change. Blowdowns get cleared, reroutes happen, memory is imperfect. I walked for another 40 minutes before I stopped. Something was wrong. I pulled out my map, a paper topo I always carry as backup, and tried to match it to where I thought I was. The trail I was on was climbing steadily. According to my map, the section of loop trail I should have been on was mostly flat at this point, with a gradual descent toward the far end of the loop. I was going the wrong way, and based on the elevation I had gained, I had been going the wrong way for almost an hour. I turned around and walked back to the junction. I stood at the post and looked at it carefully. The sign was a standard wooden post with 2 directional arrows nailed to it. The left arrow pointed to the loop continuation. The right arrow pointed to the connector trail into the backcountry. Except that was not what it said now. The left arrow, the one I had followed, was pointing right into the backcountry, and the right arrow was pointing left toward the loop. The arrows had been switched. Not the paint, not the blazes on the trees, the physical wooden arrows on the post had been physically reversed. Someone had pulled the nails, turned the signs around, and put them back. I stood there for a long time looking at it. I thought about the other car in the parking lot when I arrived. I thought about whether I had passed anyone on the trail coming in. I had not. I thought about who would do this and why. I did not have good answers to any of those questions. I took photographs of the sign. Then I turned onto the correct trail, the one the original arrows had been trying to direct me away from, and I walked out as quickly as I could. Back at the trailhead, the other car was gone. I reported the tampered sign to the Forest Service. They went out to look at it. When they came back, they confirmed what I had photographed. The signs had been reversed deliberately. They replaced the sign and filed an incident report. They told me this kind of thing occasionally happened. Usually they said it was bored teenagers or people playing pranks. But the trail I had been sent down, the connector trail into the backcountry, is 12 miles long with no exit except the way you came in. If I had kept going for another hour or 2 before realizing something was wrong, I would have been deep in the backcountry, alone, with no easy way out and no one knowing I was there. A prank. They said it was probably a prank. I do not go back to that trail. And now, at every junction on every trail I hike, I stop and check my map before I move. Every single one. The woods do not care whether you are prepared or experienced or careful. And neither do the people who use them to hide. Subscribe to Flicker of Fear Tales for new true horror stories every single week.